You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. Joining me today, as always on a Monday, is Chris. How's it going today, Chris?
I'm good, girl. Good seeing you. A lot of news obviously happening today. I'm hyped for this Lightning game after we get off too. So, yeah, it makes the money a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I feel that. I got my Warriors gear on too. The series is tied for the Warriors, so go Dubs. So we support all our local teams here. For those of you that don't know, Chris is from Tampa, right? So
yeah,
rooting for the Lightning there, and I'm rooting for the Avs. But
yep.
but look, we got plenty to talk about on football and the 49ers on its own, right? John Lynch spoke to the media today, his pre-draft presser. And before we get to the quotes and the comments, there's a couple things I think we need to touch on before we get to John Lynch's comments that I think are important to the context of his comments. So first, Trey Lance, he was at NDSU's spring game this past weekend. His brother still plays over there, right? So he was there showing his support. He got asked by someone, how his recovery is doing. He's fully cleared at this point. I think he said, it's for the past month or so he's been cleared. So good on the Trey Lance front. And, his rehab seems like all has gone well. And he was also, of course, asked about, trade rumors, things like that, to which Trey Lance said he knows nothing of the trade. Now, this morning, before John Lynch spoke, Ian Rappaport had a report out, and I'll share, the video. Let's see. Let's just make sure the volume's up and you guys can hear this. Oh, wait. So basically, I'll share the clip, but basically what he said was that what I've been saying now for quite some time is that, it's not about when or if the 49ers are going to trade Trey Lance, but more about, when. Here he says the timing is important. I'll play the clip. You guys could hear it.
Timing is interesting because whether or not Brock Purdy is healthy or when the 49ers know Brock Purdy is healthy is probably going to determine when Trey Lance is traded. If there's still uncertainty, like maybe Brock is not ready by July or August, which we think he's going to be, but we really don't know, then you probably hang on to Trey Lance as insurance. I see him getting traded only when there is someone to take his spot on the roster, and we don't know when that's going to be.
So that's what Ian Rappaport said, and I think that's important to kind of highlight, for one, because the common sense crowd, including myself, not to toot my own horn here, but I have been saying for some time, it would be so stupid and it would make little to no sense for the 49ers to trade Trey Lance during or before the draft, not knowing what's going to happen with Brock Purdy, and before seeing how he looks like throwing, maybe even after he's fully cleared, right? So it wouldn't make sense for the 49ers, and really the only way that I would see them going through with a trade is if a team offered them something ridiculous, something that made the trade and taking on that risk worth it. And that's pretty much what Ian said. I'm not surprised by it. But Chris, I want to ask you, do you think that, because now at this point, Ian Rappaport has had two reports concerning, this trade rumor, right? He was the first to say that the 49ers were fielding calls. And now this latest one where it's not really a report, but he's just kind of saying it's unlikely that they would do it unless they knew how things are going with Brock Purdy. So do you think that it's a coincidence at all that this last report came out this morning before John Lynch was going to speak with the media? Do you have any I don't know, suspicion that maybe the whispering that Ian Rappaport is coming from John Lynch.
Yeah, I think the timing is quite interesting, and it kind of gives me the impression, especially the way that Trey responded when he was at the pro day at NDSU. To me, it wasn't very convincing. Specifically speaking about the Trey stuff, he wasn't too convincing to me. John Lynch, in my opinion, wasn't too convincing. But I have to take something aside from that because I tend to glean more from Kyle Shanahan, honestly, than I do from John Lynch. So take that with a grain of salt as far as, my perspective of him being convincing as, him speaking about Trey Lance. But at any rate, yeah, I think it's possible that maybe Trey's camp is putting it out there. I'll tell you what I told my fiance this morning. We were getting dressed for work and stuff, you know what I mean? Like just mentally getting right, knowing that we're going to be talking this afternoon. It's possible that maybe even Trey's camp is putting out some of this information and/or that we don't know. Maybe Trey has even asked for, a trade given some of this, you drafted me high, didn't play me my first year. You knew I was a project, haven't been giving me too much run. Then I got hurt last year. Then he went and got Sam Darnold. And now you're talking about Brock Purdy, and just the vibes and stuff seem really off. You know what I mean? So it's quite possible that that his camp is putting that out there. It's quite possible as well. I mean, certainly, Lynch or the 49ers could be as well. But I think what my suspicion is that potentially he's already told the Niners that, hey, I want to look to play somewhere else next year. I'm not getting any younger. I want to get on the field. I've been developing. I've been working on my craft, So yeah, the timing is interesting. One thing I will say before I kick it back is that I think the other thing regarding timing as well, which is weird too, right? Like this all just feels so strange because I would think that Trey's, to your point earlier, I would think it would take something substantial for the Niners to move Trey, right? But then also I would think that they want to move him before the draft or during the draft to be able to utilize those assets now as opposed to later. But then Ian earlier was talking about, wanting to, be sure that Brock Purdy is, be able to return to form. Well, given the timetable, that doesn't make sense, right? Because the timetable we've been told he won't be able to, show what he can do or whatever until basically the end of training camp and such. So it just all seems like it just seems weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the ideal situation for the 49ers. Let's say Brock Purdy was 100% healthy. I think they'd be talking about trading Trey Lance in this draft, right? But unfortunately, that's not the case, and you have just Sam Darnold as the only healthy quarterback if you were to trade Trey Lance, which is not an ideal situation either, right? So
No,
I think so I think, just giving the circumstances that it does make sense, and they can decide, okay, we're going to roll with Trey Lance to start the season. We're going to let him compete with Sam Darnold to see who starts week 1 and while Brock Purdy is out. And then we can revisit the conversation somewhere down the line, maybe midpoint of the season or the trade deadline. But I don't think it'd be wise, like I've been saying, to, trade Lance before really knowing that Brock Purdy, and you got to be sure, right, that Brock Purdy is going to be 100% okay. So let's get to John Lynch's comments because I think that helps kind of give the full picture. One of the quotes that he said, I think there's a lot of smoke. It hasn't been extremely active. And this was him talking about the trade rumors. So to your point, Chris, him saying it's a lot of smoke, it could be coming from Trey Lance's camp, some of these rumors. Who knows? But I think another thing is interesting. It hasn't been extremely active. So yes, maybe there were some teams that called just out of, sheer curiosity, but it feels like there wasn't maybe anything more than that. And kind of to what Ian alluded to as well, that it would take a pretty substantial deal to get something moving. Kind of also got that sense from John Lynch as well. Another thing that John Lynch said, he said, Trey and I have talked. We're on the same page. We're excited about the position he's put himself in this offseason. I found that interesting that John Lynch said that they've talked and they're on the same page. And just this weekend, Trey Lance, when asked about the trade, was like, I don't know anything
Yep.
about it. I don't know if he just meant like, I don't know if there is any interest or anything like that, but for him to say like, I don't know anything was kind of interesting. So are they really on the same page?
Right.
I thought that was kind of interesting. What was your take on that?
No, I totally do. I agree. I mean, when Lynch said that in the presser, I remembered, Trey's comments from this weekend. And that's kind of what I was mentioning a little while ago, as far as it not adding up and not seeming on the up and up. You know what I'm saying? It didn't give me a sense of comfort. And the only reason why I speak of that, right, is I'm Team Niners. I'm not like Team Trey or Team Brock. I just want to see what Trey's got. You know what I mean? And I want my quarterback to be a killer. And I get the impression that with the skill sets and the skill set and the traits that Trey could be a guy like that. He could be a guy that, is very dynamic in that regard in an offense like Shanahan's with the 49ers got right now. So that being said, yeah. So when Trey was like, no, I have no comment on that. I was like, ooh, okay. Like that just kind of like, that was kind of interesting. And yeah, so, Lynch saying that him and Trey have been on the same page, have been talking and everything, that didn't align with what Trey said. So it was kind of peculiar.
Which they very well could have spoken between, the time
That's
that
true.
Lance spoke and John Lynch spoke to the media today, right? That's very well a possibility, but still interesting for sure. Now, John Lynch was asked if Trey will be on the roster in 2023, and John Lynch said, I expect Trey to be here. We're excited about Trey's ability to compete and what he can do for our franchise. The only thing that's changed his offseason is Trey has gone and got himself healthy. So that's encouraging. I mean, GMs, Lynch, known to say a lot of things, right? Historically, maybe not always the most accurate, but I still, just hearing him say it, it's good to know. And it's, like I said, it's kind of like what we expected to this point, right? The 49ers kind of have to keep Trey Lance around because they don't know if, most likely Brock Purdy's not going to be ready week 1, right? So I think that's where, that comment comes into play. Now, it doesn't mean he's not going to be traded somewhere down the line, but I think for right now, we can assume that he's not going to be traded this offseason. And, that's what I've been saying for quite some time. Another thing he said, we're just excited about having 3 really quality quarterbacks in the room and letting those guys go out and compete. So, they know the situation. They want these guys to go out and compete, go have fun, I guess. So,
yeah, I do believe that. Yeah, I do believe that.
Absolutely.
And given the injury history at the quarterback position and such, doing what you can to reinforce that room, I do believe that. And also the other aspect that just makes it kind of strange is, they're going to bring someone in, obviously, right? You're going to have at least like 4 arms or so in training camp, to have a camp arm and such as well. But I think you're weakening that room by moving on from, it doesn't matter who it is, Trey, Brock, whoever, you know what I'm saying? Like, not that there's any talks about Brock being traded, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I think that's another reason as to why it kind of seems like it'd be a little hard to believe for them to make that move at this time, because they've done work to reinforce that room. Recent history has shown the challenges that they've had with having multiple injuries at the quarterback position. So, yeah, I don't really see it happening or being imminent.
And a lot has been made about the 49ers, meeting with certain quarterbacks that are going to be available in this draft. The most notable, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? I believe we talked about him a bit in last week's episode. And he was asked about that, John Lynch was. And, he pretty much just chalked it up as it being due diligence. And, we do a lot of due diligence homework on pretty much everyone. And that's true. I think that is true. So I will take his word on that. And also, you got to do your homework regardless, because what if on the off chance that a team did give you a really good offer for Trey Lance, just the off chance, right? You got to be prepared and know what other quarterbacks are going to be there and available, because at that point, like, you would probably get a quarterback early, right? Had a Trey Lance trade transpired. So I think doing the homework on some of these guys makes sense. It doesn't necessarily mean a trade is going to happen, but they got to be prepared for any scenario anyway. And John Lynch even said, sometimes the homework that they do now goes into effect, years later when some of these guys are free agents or they're available for trade, and you already know these guys. You have a draft profile on some of these guys. I was looking at, not to like totally derail the conversation, but I was looking at some of the past drafts from this regime, and I always talk about the importance of the top 30 visits and how sometimes those indicate like who they eventually draft. There are a couple of drafts from the past, top 30 visits from the past that have years later been free agent pickups for this team. And I'm not remembering off the top of my head. I'll have to tweet about it, but yeah, I mean, that's just what all of this is, right? It's just homework, it's due diligence, so I wouldn't look too much into it. Now, we got a few people up in here, so make sure you guys like this video if you have not yet. I'm curious to know what you guys think watching. Make sure you let us know in the comments. We're trying to have a discussion here, so let us know what you think about John Lynch's comments. Were you convinced that Trey Lance is not going to be traded? Do you feel he's going to be traded even more? I am curious. I want to know. But now the next topic is Brandon Ayuk, and Grant Cohn asked John Lynch about a potential trade for Brandon Ayuk in the future, knowing that, both Ayuk and Debo, could they pay both of these guys? It was a great question, and one that we've been asking like among ourselves, right? For this past off season. And honestly, it felt like John Lynch was a little thrown off by it. Like he was not expecting the question at all. There was a little stutter. I'll show a clip of it right now because
antsy a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. You definitely see the uncomfortableness, and we'll talk about what that might mean in a bit. But here's what he said.
Reached out to you about potentially trading for Brandon Ayuk, and is that something you would consider?
I'm not going to get into specifics on people. We love Brandon Ayuk, and excited about Brandon being a part of this team. I'll just leave it at that.
That's the first comment that he said, right? And for now, I'll just stop it right there. But you saw the stuttering, we love it, and then shutting it down pretty much, which I believe they continued asking about it. But he said, we love Brandon Ayuk. I'm going to leave it at that kind of thing. I thought that was interesting because I don't know. I guess that's not really the response I was getting. And maybe it was just because he wasn't able to like prepare his politically correct finessed answer that he kind of just felt like, okay, let me just like not answer this at all right now. What did you think about that?
But I'm gonna tell you what I think. This is the first and foremost. It always trips me out when John Lynch gets like that in circumstances, right? Because all these cats, they all have even college players. First and foremost, they have media training. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Second of all, their media team, the Niners press the Niners press team internally, they're not doing their due diligence if they're not at least prepping these guys for questions that they know they should be getting. That all being said, when he gets that question and he seems just kind of like so off guard about it, and history is an example, right? You've seen John Lynch with like the wiping his forehead and like rubbing his ear, and like his physical cues are kind of like indicators as to kind of like where he's at, kind of, right? But that being said, I was interesting again. Like, I'm not trying to over dissect it, but he said what he said. He said, I don't want to get into particular players. At the owners meeting, he had no problem. He was like, hey, he actually did say I'd be surprised if we didn't pick up the 5th-year option, which it's like, hey, man, you're the GM,
that was just a month ago.
Right. So to go from that to kind of like, I'm not going to really get into particular individual players. Well, again, even if he didn't mean that or he was caught off guard, you're going to get into particular players because they're going to get asked questions. You got asked about Nick Bosa. You're going to get asked about Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So you are getting into particular players, right? So that's just an interesting response. And I wanted to check it out, right? I'll probably have to do some research on it and shoot you a text or something. But he had made a comment about we like to wait till after the draft and sit down and have conversations. He was referring to him Brandon Ayuk and Javon Kinlaw about picking up their 5th-year options. And I'm curious in history not how long it took, but when 5th-year options were picked up for like recent players, right? In the time of them being in San Francisco. I'm not sure about that. Maybe you might be familiar, but yeah. So I just wanted to kind of check into that to see if there was any legitimacy to that particular point about waiting until after the draft, those conversations and such. But yeah, I thought that was another interesting response as well.
For sure. I'm going to play the rest of the clip and see. He might have brought that up in the second half of this.
If you pick up his 5th-year option.
Yeah, they're talking about the 5th-year option now.
Debo's number talked about you can't keep Lynchy and Trent Williams. Is it DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead situation?
Yeah.
How do you view that looking? I know we're talking about 2024, but is that something you can creatively navigate, having both those guys remain on the roster next season?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's a fair question because I understand the line of thinking. You can't keep everyone. We're trying to do something special this year, and Brandon's going to be a big part of that, and beyond as well. And so, yes, you always have to think out a few years, but we're really excited about Brandon. Feel like he made another big step next year, and I think the best is yet to come. And so we want him being a part of it. And at some point, yeah, you have to figure things out. And I guess we'll take that as it comes. But as of right now and into the future, we're really excited about
Yeah, so I mean, again, like I think it's really interesting. It's almost like he doesn't want to like jinx it or, because you don't know what's going to happen in negotiations. So
Sure.
Kind of leaving the door open for anything, but making it clear we love Brandon Ayuk. It was very similar to like the Debo Samuel, some of the quotes from that time period of before that extension happened. A lot of the same things. I would expect, the 49ers kind of smart, I guess, in this way. It hasn't really come to become anything yet, but at almost every draft, there's a rumor about a potential 49ers player being traded.
Sure.
Last year was Debo Samuel. Yeah, maybe you could count Jimmy Garoppolo in that too. The year prior, Jimmy Garoppolo as well. And it's almost like they try to drum up some interest, like by being naive and like inviting interest on certain players. This year, obviously, it was Trey Lance. So, like, I feel like next year it's going to be Brandon Ayuk. Like, we're going to be talking about Brandon Ayuk. Oh, is he going to be traded before the draft? Like clockwork. And I think partially because that's how the 49ers kind of frame it. And I think partially because they want to see if anyone will just like offer them something. So I think
or even George Kittle.
Yeah, same thing. So like, yeah, George Kittle, I feel like he's kind of setting it up for that. And they really don't know what's going to happen. The 5th-year option stuff I thought was interesting just because like we said, literally a month ago, he said the 49ers expect to pick up Brandon Ayuk's 5th-year option. Today, when asked about it, he was kind of non-committal about it, but he said we don't announce that until like after the draft. And I don't know if it's because maybe he hasn't spoken to one or both of the players, like Ayuk or Kinlaw, about their status and what they hope to do with that 5th-year option. Maybe they haven't told Kinlaw that they don't plan to do it. That was a report, right, this offseason, that they don't plan to pick up Kinlaw's 5th-year option. That was hey, if I'm John Lynch, I'd hold off that conversation as well. I don't want to give Kinlaw any upsetting news. I'd be pretty scared. But, so maybe that's the scenario. Maybe they just haven't told Kinlaw, and it would be unfair when asked about both of them, because he was asked about both, to only say yes on Ayuk, but not give an answer on Kinlaw, or not want to say before having told Kinlaw, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I guess we'll know soon enough. But yeah, I thought that was
those guys. Yeah, to me, it was interesting to me too. And if those guys get through the weekend still being on the team, I get the impression that shout out to my brother Brandon. What's up, Brandon? I get the impression that if Brandon Ayuk gets to, I don't see them picking up Kinlaw's 5th-year option regardless, but I think that Brandon Ayuk gets to through the weekend, that I see that being a greater possibility that they'll pick up his option. What that tells me and kind of his response is that, yeah, they've gotten some calls on Ayuk, nothing that they're excited about or whatever. Yeah. But if something transpires at the draft, he may be on the move. So the issue that I have with that potential of Brandon Ayuk getting moved, I mean, I got love for Brandon Ayuk. I like, my guys' autographs, jersey right behind me and such, right? But I do, oftentimes, we get really attached, right, to players and so on and so forth, and don't see the bigger, vision or scheme or whatever that the team may have or whatever have you. My issue with, moving a wide receiver is, like, what are you replacing him with? Because especially at the wide receiver position, like, Shanahan doesn't really shake anything with those guys in their rookie year. So even if, like, there's some hot shot first-round draft pick, say someone wants to trade Brandon Ayuk. I'm sorry, say someone wants to trade for Brandon Ayuk and they gave us a first, right? And then we go and replace him with the first, get younger and cheaper at the position or whatever. Rookie receivers don't really do much. I mean, even with Brandon Ayuk being as good as he is, even his rookie year, Shanahan and Lynch admitted that they wouldn't have given him as much run if it wasn't for the injuries that they had. So that is my issue with even the consideration of Brandon Ayuk being on the trade block, because, he's a proven commodity, and I think he's just getting better. But yeah, again, I think he's in a similar position to where it would take a lot for the Niners to even want to consider moving off from Brandon Ayuk for sure. Yeah. Not crazy about his tweet not too long ago, that could have been just, and that's I wish I thought someone was going to bring that up today. I thought someone was going to bring that up, but they didn't.
It happened it was kind of low key enough, and it happened not that long ago, but long enough ago that they probably just forgot about it. Yeah, but I thought that was interesting as well. I was listening to the 49ers Talk podcast earlier with Matt Mayoko, right? And one thing that was interesting, and to kind of, just close the conversation on Lance and Ayuk possible trades, he brought up the fact or the point that all the trades or the big trades that have happened with the 49ers, we didn't know about. We didn't even hear anything about them before they happened. You think about DeForest Buckner. You think about Christian McCaffrey. You think about when they traded for Trent Williams, when they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. We didn't know anything about those trades taking place before it took place. And most of the smoke, most of the trade noise that we hear doesn't end up happening. So I would just like to point that out. To me, it kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier that, I think they kind of purposefully tried to create smoke or drum up interest in some of these players just to see, just because the draft is rolling around and, hey, let's just see if a team offers us something. And that's why I think also most teams or most times nothing ends up happening, because I think they're asking for a lot, right? But it doesn't hurt to just see and listen to offers, right? Speaking of listening to offers, the 49ers this whole time they've had a very consistent stance. We'll listen on anybody, right? Deebo Samuel today, or just last month when asked about it, John Lynch gave the same response. Well, isn't anybody when asked about Trey Lance? But today he was asked about Nick Bosa. And he said hotline closed. Yep. It never was open.
He was definitive with that one.
He was very definitive with that one. And that's the question that everyone has kind of been asking this entire time that they've been saying, we'll listen to anybody. It's well, would you listen to trades for Brock Purdy? Would you listen to trades for Nick Bosa? Is it really anybody?
Right.
And John Lynch kind of told on himself a little bit by giving that answer, and I don't think he really realized it at that point in time, but you realize the double standard. Clearly. I get it. It's Nick Bosa. Right. I think that out of anyone on the team, that's probably maybe the one player, and maybe Trent Williams, that's probably the two players that are completely off limits and the hotline would be closed. You don't even answer the call. But still, I thought it was interesting because to have the stance, we'll listen to anybody, and then say that, it's a little hypocritical.
Oh, without a doubt, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And what it goes to show you is that when they know, they know. You know what I mean? Like when you know, you know. So especially as it relates to, again, I know going back to the Ayuk conversation right quick, but if they wanted to pick it up, they'll pick it up. Like I just came out, Ian Rappaport just said that the Bucs just picked up Tristan Wirfs' fifth-year option. So, if there's no question about it, they would do it, right? So obviously there's, something in play, potentially, not in play, I shouldn't say that. There's a consideration to see if they will get an offer or whatever.
Right.
And they'll just want to see. But I would be surprised. I mean, given where this team is and how it's constructed and such, I mean, you're better with Brandon Ayuk than you are without him.
Yeah. Which again, like I'm totally okay with like a team listening to some offers. Like that's fine. But like don't say you'll listen to anybody or you'll listen for trades on anybody, when clearly that's not true. Like just say how it is. But I get it. It's the politics of it, I guess. But again, John Lynch told on himself today a little bit with that one. Look, a couple of other things that John Lynch mentioned today. One, because it was a pre-draft presser, so there were some questions about the draft, believe it or not. And he did mention that Frank Gore had joined some of the pre-draft meetings with the team, which I'm pretty excited about. Not really surprising because I think Frank Gore has expressed the desire to, want to be involved with the organization one way or another and wanting to get into scouting. He was at the 49ers local pro day, with Bobby Turner, Anthony Lynn, checking out the running back. So it seems like, they're working him in to, fit somewhere within their scouting department, whether that be as an advisor or, something else. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty cool to know that he was in some of those meetings.
Yeah, without a doubt. I agree. And it comes as no surprise. I think shortly after he retired, the front office was mentioning that, Frank Gore had expressed some interest of getting into, the front office side of the business and everything. I think that they probably waited for some of his like personal legal issues to kind of cool off a little bit because things kind of like, you stopped hearing about that a little bit after he got, caught up in some stuff. And I think even ownership had said that, they were welcoming Frank with open arms, in regard to him getting engaged with like the front office and everything. So, I'm not surprised. It'll be interesting to see, kind of how that goes. They obviously the Niners have a great track record of recent years of like developing, guys, up through the ranks in the front office and even spinning out and going to other teams and such. So, sounds like John Lynch was saying that Frank is willing to put in the work and grind and such and all that, they'll have a place for him.
Yeah, and I love that because I think everyone loves Frank Gore. He has a really special place in every faithful's hearts, right? So just knowing that he's still in the building in any capacity, I think is exciting for a lot of us. But that's pretty much like the most notable things from John Lynch's presser. And, the next time we'll hear from John Lynch will be after the draft. So I'm excited about that. And we'll probably talk about the draft here in a bit, but I wanted to touch on one thing. Brock Purdy, he was on the New Heights podcast with the Kelsey brothers. It was a pretty fun, podcast. A lot of talk about Buffalo Wild Wings because it was like the sponsorship or whatever. Skip through those parts, but they did talk about. They asked Brock Purdy, like who was someone who helped you a lot last year. To which Brock Purdy mentioned Trey Lance. He mentioned just having him in like the meeting rooms and helping him was huge. And then also, of course, mentioned George Kittle as a big help. And then I think it was Kelsey asked. They're both Kelsey. I think who's the older brother?
Jason
Kelsey asked him if it was Travis. Sorry. Asked him if George Kittle really asked him in the NFC Championship game if he could throw left-handed. And Brock Purdy said, yeah, he really asked him. And then Brock Purdy said that he learned how to throw left-handed this offseason. I don't know if he was just like joking. He seemed pretty serious. So like, I don't know how quickly you can learn to throw with your left hand either. That seems like something that would take a long time to get good at. But are we going to see a left-handed Brock at some point? Hopefully not, because that would mean his right arm is not doing so great. But I thought that was pretty funny.
No, yeah, it was interesting to see him on that pod too. Kelsey brothers are doing their thing with their podcasts and stuff, and it was kind of cool that they had Brock on there as a guest and everything. But yeah, it was interesting getting kind of some insights from Brock Purdy. I haven't really seen too much of him in like a setting like that, just like casually, because I didn't get a chance to see the pod that he did where he was talking about, not being able to potentially play next year or whatever. So it was good seeing that. There was something else I guess he was saying too. I think it was in the Cowboys game or something where he was talking about where he was like high stepping and like one of the defenders.
It was the Seahawks. It was the Seahawks.
Oh, game. Seahawks. That's right. Seahawks game. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, the linebacker talked some trash to him after that. You guys should check it out. The New Heights pod. It came out today. Brock Purdy joined. So just check that out. It was a good listen. But let's talk about some news around the NFL, how it impacts this draft, right? Finally, this Aaron Rodgers trade is freaking done. The Jets traded for Aaron Rodgers. They swapped first round picks this year, and there's a bunch of other. Honestly, I don't care. I don't care about this trade. I'm just so glad it's over because, like, for this past, like, this entire offseason, I've just been so tired of hearing about it. And just Rodgers in general, him being linked to the 49ers. I don't care. I'm glad it's done. But, like, the Packers, who have been somewhat of a, nemesis to the 49ers in playoffs past, we do have their number. Now it seems like they're going to move forward with Jordan Love, and they have, extra picks to work with. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of rebuild, if you will, that team.
I agree. I mean, honestly, this might come as a surprise to some, but maybe not to others. But I think that division probably at least as it looks right now, going to be between the Lions and the Vikings. Of course, the Vikings were, exposed as frauds last year, and the Lions, yeah. And then the Lions, I think they've been emerging the last couple of years. I know there are some people out there that haven't really been giving the Lions their props, but I'm telling you, like, even going into last season, I liked what Dan Campbell was putting together there. They've been, they had issues with their secondary, and of course, they've been beefing that up. So, Emmanuel Mosley's over there now. So, at any rate, as well as C.J. Gardner-Johnson and some others. But, I think that the Packers definitely, it'll remain to be seen how they'll be impacted. But I don't see them having a playoff push next year. Really, I think it's probably in their division. They're going to be looking up at the Vikings and Lions. Probably, at least that's how it looks right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to take, some time for that to really start clicking to get going. But Jordan Love seems like, he's ready to take on the Packers franchise. So we'll see how that goes. I guess as for the Jets, AFC, so doesn't really impact the 49ers much. But Robert Saleh, man, he got a quarterback. That's a pretty big deal because the Jets honestly have some nice pieces.
They do.
You look at Breece Hall and some of the other guys on that offense for sure. Like they're really just a quarterback away from being. I don't want to say contenders, but like definitely to be like a wild card team or something like that. They got the defense as well.
It's gonna be some exciting games. Yeah, it's gonna be some exciting games between them and the Dolphins next year in their division for sure. They're gonna definitely have time for at least one of those probably.
Oh yeah, I think it was either Schefter or Rappaport said that, like, yeah, now that Rodgers is there, they're like a big ticket team. They're gonna get a bunch of primetime games, so that'll be interesting. I've kind of soured on Aaron Rodgers in like the past few years. Like, I'm
Oh
just
yeah,
like sick of the antics and just like
same.
hearing about him. But happy for Robert Saleh. Of course, the Jets will be an easier watch this year. But look, let's talk about other NFC teams, or NFC West teams, I should say, because the 49ers don't have a first round pick. But the Seahawks, they have a pretty high first round pick. And, a lot of people are talking about, the Cardinals as well have they're at 3, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of talk about, what are the Cardinals going to do? What are the Seahawks going to do? I think the Seahawks are in such a great position, and I hate that for us. But, man, they could get Jalen Carter. They could get Anthony Richardson. They're in a great spot to get a really talented guy. And like I said, they're already in a good spot with their team. Like, really, everyone thought their team last year was going to be crap, and a lot of their draft picks were great and contributed right away. So honestly, not that bad is what we thought. So, like, a couple of good draft picks in this draft could really help put them over the edge to competing with the 49ers, once again. So, what do you think? I mean, do you think it'd be scarier if they drafted a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, even though they have like Geno Smith for this year? Or, would you be a little more threatened by a Jalen Carter or another like defensive lineman?
So in the short term, a Jalen Carter would bother me. In the long term, an Anthony Richardson. So
Yeah.
I got 3 degrees at University of Florida. So I'm a Gator through and through, and I don't think that Anthony Richardson's ready to hit the field right now. I would have liked for him to stay in school for selfish reasons, but also for himself personally, right? I think what's best for him is to probably get drafted somewhere, get parked for a year or two, and then maybe get unleashed year 2 or year 3 or something like that. So that's why in the short term, a D lineman like Carter, I think would be more concerning to me than Richardson, because he wouldn't be playing right away if the Seahawks got him, but then he might be nice in a few years just because of those physical traits and such, and working on his craft, a la Trey Lance. One thing I'll say before we cut though, Steph, is if we're being objective, right, and a lot of people may not want to hear this, but the Seahawks may be closer to being a problem than we realize. Okay, and
Yes.
and if the roles were reversed, we would have confidence in the manner in which the Seahawks have confidence. First and foremost, it's so frustrating, but the Seahawks just won't die. To your point, like, it's like every year the Seahawks are expected to be one of the worst teams. I shouldn't say every year. In the last 3 or 4 years, they've had historically bad defenses at some point of the season, and they find a way to beat us. Of course, we swept them last year, but you get what I'm saying. We've had issues with them. Last year, they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league, made it to the playoffs, killed the draft last year. And then, presumably those players will get better, as they move on. If they have another strong draft this year, they're drafting at 5 and 20 in the first round. So if they hit the draft in a similar fashion that they did last year, they're going to put together some good pieces. The wild card is Geno Smith, right? Is he going to have? I mean, he was starting to come down to earth a little bit towards the end of last year, but if he has a season, like first 2/3 of the year that he had last year or whatever, and the ball bounces their way a few times here and there, they can continue to be a formidable opponent. So I'll never sleep on the Seahawks. I can't stand them, but I got to give them that respect in that regard. And I don't like Pete Carroll. I don't, but Pete Carroll, he gets those guys up. And they play hard for him. So I think it'll be interesting to keep our eyes on what's going on with the Seahawks and how they're drafted and stuff, because we can't sleep on them.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a little worried, quite honestly, about who they might pick. I'm going to be pissed if they pick Julius Brents with their second first round pick, but hopefully not. but we'll see. We'll see how the draft shakes out. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm going to have someone from Sports Info Solutions to talk about the draft. They got some great draft tools. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about fits for the 49ers in this draft. And again, 49ers don't pick until the 3rd round. And, one thing we didn't really mention, it seems like John Lynch is kind of okay. He sounded like he was okay with sticking with their picks that they have in the 3rd round. He said they're confident with a player that they like, landing to them with their 3 third-round picks. So it didn't sound like a guy that's going to be moving around a whole lot, or at least moving up. And, if they do move up, he was quite convincing today of otherwise. So yeah, that was just one little tidbit I wanted to add there. But yeah, tomorrow we're going to be talking about 49ers fits. And Wednesday probably won't, because the 49ers don't pick. Wait, does a draft start? Oh, it starts Thursday. Yeah. Wednesday. Wednesday I'll do a mock draft. Where's that tomorrow? You know what? Just make sure you guys are subscribed. You'll see things coming up scheduled. And that's when I'll be going live. So don't listen to me right now. Listen to my upcoming shows, what I have going for you. Make sure you guys like this video if you have not yet. Appreciate all the love, Mike. Thank you. Make sure you guys like this video. And I had a poll in the comments. I asked you guys, will Trey Lance be traded in 2023? This year, not the season, but just this calendar year, will Trey Lance be traded? 18% of you said yes. 82% of you said no. So if you guys are curious what those results were, that's how it's looking right now. I think I agree with you guys as well. So, but with that, I'm just going to let you enjoy the rest of your Monday. Talk to you later this week, guys. Peace.